This is week 10, Alternative Food Networks. The readings for this week draw on themes of inequalities from commodification and the need for sustainable alternatives to our current globalized food system. Through undertaking these readings, it has unveiled the need to dismantle the neoliberal discourses surrounding food production and consumption, so we can strive for a more economically, environmentally, and nutritionally sustainable food system. Firstly, from reading chapter 8 of Julie Guthman's Agrarian Dreams, The Paradox of Organic Farming in California, we can see that the Californian agricultural sector is highly industrialized and a result of historical, social, and social nature relations. These relations have led to the corporatocracy of the industry, where features such as the exploitation of marginalized groups for labor, cropping patterns, and marketing outlets are embedded in this sector. As a result, there are barriers to entry for new methods like the production of organic foods. Consequently, the question I have chosen to assess is, how can organic production be further incorporated into industrial agricultural sectors? I think for this incorporation, there needs to be a stronger enforcement of regulations across the organic sector. For example, the organic movement traditionally operates with the absence of pesticide regulating technology. I think that this lack of regulation contradicts what it means for a food to be organic. As illustrated by Guthman, the further research into the sustainable production of organic foods would increase the validity of the organic label. Proportionally, an increased emphasis on regulation would lead to a recognition that organic agriculture is more sustainable than its conventional chemical counterpart. Secondly, Guthman recognizes that the production of high-quality organic food is associated with high costs of production. These costs often act as a deterrent for farmers to transition from chemical to organic production. To resolve this problem, policies could be imposed, such as reducing the rent of farmland or donating subsidies to the growers who make this transition. Guthman illustrates that the policy of directing subsidies to farmers has been implemented in Europe with great success. However, these policies need to be incorporated in industrialized agricultural sectors, not only in the developed world, but also in the developing world, in countries like Indonesia. This is crucial to the global transition of organic production, as the majority of crop cultivation is concentrated in the developing world.
Zach, do you think industrialized agricultural sectors like that of California can be explained by land commodification processes?
Well, Katie, I think these industrialized agricultural sectors have wide historical context. In California, for example, Guthman states that the marginalized labor arrangements in the industry are long-standing. I think that the relationships between land and labor is inherent to the land commodification processes.
Oh yeah, I actually remember it in one of the readings when Polanyi was describing these features as essential elements of industry, along with money too.
Yes, I remember how he describes money as the third essential element. This actually can further explain the question that Katie asked. Sectors like that of California are oligopolistic, where few corporations make up the majority of investments. More broadly, I think you can look at it from the point of view that all places where nature has been exploited to produce goods are the direct result of land commodification processes.
Guthman alludes to the organic farming industry in greater detail in Chapter 1, exploring its development as a means to counter the agribusiness that has consumed our global food system. From this chapter, I was left wondering how the agribusiness became replicated in organic production. The agribusiness has been scrutinised because of its association with capital, profit, and commodification, and the organic movement was introduced an alternative means of production that was intended to be driven by belief and morality instead of capital and profit. Guthman uses the example of California as a key site in both the agribusiness and the development in the so-called organic movement. On the surface, these sites of production appear as a paradox, comparing the industrialised, chemicalised, large-scale production with the agribusiness versus the organic agrarian vision that supports small-scale, localised and family production, based on the premise that localising production would create a more environmentally and morally conscious dynamic that would diffuse existing problems in our food system. There is an ideology attached to the organic local production, and it presumes that fresher, healthier, and more morally situated position in the market in relation to farmers too. However, Guthman suggests that organic and local farming has now become gentrified and commodified, with companies now commercialising organic products. Subsequently, tying a green designer label on organic food has become a commodity that only few can afford. She also questions whether the local really does equate to freshness and equality, something Bourne and Pukel describe as the local trap. In this sense, the organic sector has become tied up in a new set of actors and market value and is inextricably linked to that of its industrial counterparts. It is a reworked system of capital that exploits consumers by labelling itself as local, fresher, and healthier. Instead, to prevent the organic sector becoming further commodified, it is not enough to suggest that localising and changing scale of production is a solution in itself, if it will still be run through the same commercialised and profit-centred approach it is attempting to counter.
Katie, can I just ask, do you think localised production should be eradicated entirely to support a sustainable food system?
No, I wouldn't say so. It's not suggesting that local production is inherently bad. It does still capture an important place in food culture and production. Localised production can act as a site of resistance and livelihood for many, especially plantation workers cultivating food on the slave subsistence plots discussed by Carey, which is an extremely sustainable manner. However, the problem is the level of corporation organic production and the assumption that local always equates to sustainability, as conveyed by Boren and Purcell. There can be many downfalls of enforcing localised production as a primary means of achieving sustainability. For example, in a site that may be lacking natural resources required for production, in this instance, it would be more sustainable to import food, mitigating the damage to land and limiting resources. Moreover, if we become obsessed with fixating on the local, it deprives other credible and perhaps influential ways of promoting wider scales of sustainability. For example, in developing policies such as an EU-wide law that would mandate more sustainable agricultural processes across the board. This is a global level response that still supports large-scale production while advancing sustainability. Therefore, suggesting it is not the scale is at the centre of the issue, but rather a need to alter the capitalisation and neoliberal priorities that are damaging our current food system.
Thank you.
What you mentioned about dismantling the neoliberalisation of the current food system is very applicable to my reading of Who Pays for Dinner, which led me to the question of, will the proposed solutions to the health crisis continue to adversely affect those currently suffering from the globalised food chain? The commodification of food and increasingly globalised food production system has led to a rise in non-communicable diseases, most notably in the US, who is fighting an obesity epidemic. This reading offered an insight to who pays the price from the corporate globalised food production, and I chose to focus on the discourses surrounding the globalised food chain's implication on health. Policy creation to conquer the rising problem of obesity involved a neoliberal cost analysis of the impact of mass consumerism and unrestricted food production on populations' health. The cost analysis did produce a result in favour of restricting large corporations' production of unhealthy food. However, the solutions to the health crisis are still part of a neoliberal framework which involves putting an economic value on health through calculating the cost obesity has had to healthcare. I personally don't think you can put a value on life. Government also alludes to the idea that conforming to the political discourses of the US obesity war would be further endorsing the neoliberal agenda of governments, which intend to control populations' dietary patterns for maximum economic benefit. Therefore, rather than intending to redress the social shortcomings of the globalised food system, the neoliberal cost analysis of obesity is intending to ameliorate the economic shortcomings of the obesity crisis on the higher class. Therefore, we must dismantle the neoliberal framework which is used to create food health policy. The reading draws on how this adversely affects lower income groups, as the obesity crisis can be seen as a social construct of class. It is a way to blame the poor rather than the large food corporations for the food health crisis, as obesity is highest in lower income groups, whilst the economic burden of obesity is highest in higher groups. Solution policy therefore tries to solve the economic shortcomings of obesity on the higher classes, rather than solve the health issues of the lower classes who adversely suffer from the health implications of a globalised food chain. Therefore, in answer to my question, the same group who benefit from the commodification of food benefit from changing policies to redress the repercussions of the globalised food system, whilst lower income groups who suffer under the globalised food system continue to be adversely economically affected by food solution policies such as the regressive taxation, like the sugar tax, whilst also suffering from the highest rates of obesity. There is a further gender discrimination, as women of low socioeconomic status in America are 50% more likely to be obese than men from higher classes. Food health policies therefore adversely affect low-income populations, and the politics surrounding obesity, which seek to blame the consumer, can be seen as a means to further control women and their bodies.
How do developing countries suffer from these neoliberal discourses on food, Ruby?
Well, the reading made it clear that most food workers pay a personal price to satisfy the consumer demand. The neoliberal free trade system of food production for profit rather than nutrition means that small scale global South farmers are uncompetitive in the global market due to what a Caledonian lens would outline as a lack of a manufacturing base. Their lack of a local food system due to colonialism stagnates nutritional development, and neoliberal discourses of trade allow Western corporations to infiltrate their food markets. Therefore, a trajectory of rising non-communicable diseases can be expected, as seen by the obesity crisis in the Caribbean, where sugary beverages are causing one of the highest global rates of obesity. Producers of these sugary beverages from Western corporations have a responsibility to not market their products towards vulnerable populations who are still trying to establish a local nutritious food system. We may look towards the subsistence farming of developing countries to establish more sustainable food networks for the future, rather than to rely on Western corporations and government who have a neoliberal agenda.
What you mentioned about inequalities in the global food system is closely linked to colonialism and international repression. Geographies of responsibility can be applied to this issue so we can find a more equitable solution. The reading by Noxolo, Ragaram and Maj concerns new approaches that we can take for issues concerning the geographies of responsibility. This is a very relevant topic at the moment, with much debate occurring around issues of responsibility for colonialism. After reading the paper, I considered the question, what are the dangers of dealing with the geographies of responsibility without consulting theory? A key issue with the current geographies of responsibility is a lack of recognition of the interconnected nature of colonialism's consequences. These consequences need to be examined with an acknowledgement to how various structures of repression can be interlinked. If responsibility is ascribed and discussed without giving consideration to intersectionality, there will always be groups that are forgotten about, and true equality cannot be achieved. Without intersectionality, the geographies of responsibility will remain rooted in the dated top-down system mentioned by the authors, and the world cannot move forward to a post-colonial system with true equality.
Sorry, Max, can you clarify what you mean by top-down?
Yeah, a top-down system is one where the degrees of responsibility are ascribed by those accused. Utilizing theory offers a solution to this issue, though. Theory can enable traditionally repressed voices to be heard, and responsibility can then be ascribed to the correct agents in a just manner, so that progress can be made towards a fairer and more equal world. The paper mentions drawing on the rich vein of anti-colonial sentiment in post-colonial theory. This shows that the authors are actively trying to discuss this issue using arguments from various different perspectives. However, there are barriers to the effective use of this theory in this situation. If the traditional academic sphere doesn't value theory from previously marginalized writers, responsibility cannot be accurately ascribed and progress cannot be made. If these academics don't have their voices heard, then the geographies of responsibility can be seen to be a continuation of colonial dominance. This is because agency is removed from the repressed people, and the authors recognize this as one of the worst outcomes of colonialism. Therefore, it is clear that a new approach to the geographies of responsibility is required, which acknowledges theory and input from those previously marginalized, so that we can avoid going back to the systems of colonial dominance which we're striving to leave in the past.
Is the same true, do you think, for issues surrounding animal welfare?
I think more reading can be done into this topic to explore that question, such as Gunderson's 2013 paper on issues with animal welfare in commodified cattle production.
Achieving an economically, environmentally, nutritionally sustainable food system is more complex than it seems. Drawing on the themes considered in our readings, we have come to the realization that there is no holistic food policy solution that pleases all scales of producers and consumers.
Katie and Zach's discussion of the entailed land and food commodification of organic farming presents the difficulties in shifting to a sustainable food system in a capitalist world. I developed this to critique the neoliberal policies aiming to solve the food crisis arising from industrial food production, whilst Max draws on how post-colonial theory can correct the inequalities of food commodification.
Overall, considering all that has been discussed, I think there's no monotheistic strategy to move forward. However, we hope to see a future approach to sustainability that encompasses opinions and implications from across the whole global food chain. Thank you.